This is Fireside Chat with me, Johnny B. All right, hey everybody, welcome back. It's another episode of Fireside Chats, and I'm your host, Johnny B. Thanks for tuning back in this week. We are sitting down with another old friend of mine, a guy named Marcus Davis, Marine Corps veteran. Marcus, how you doing today, man?
Hey, how's it going, man? How you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Thank you for sitting down and joining us and agreeing to tell your story. Looking forward to hearing all about it. So, just to give everybody some background, Marcus and I actually used to work together back at one of our previous employers in the later end of the 2010s. Did some traveling for work together and had some shenanigans. But he's got some good things going on in his life. Praise God for that. And he's going to tell us about his story. So let's start that off. So tell us about where you're from and how you grew up.
Yeah, so born and raised in Chicago. Grew up in a house of three with a single mom. And growing up early 90s in Chicago wasn't the best of times, dealing with all the family and things that we had going around us and all the negativity, but still try to, go forth and prosper, as they say, with schooling. Ended up going to two different elementary schools at that point in time. And then the first one, I was a rotten egg, D student, had to get out that neighborhood, between all the gang violence and things that were going on. Ended up leaving there and moving into a better community when I was younger, and end up going to the different separate school, and just night and day. The dynamics were just totally different. Just one end of the spectrum to the other, where I became an A student, gifted student, and progressed really well into my teenage years, and had to test, because Chicago has a magnet school system program where you can test into the high school you go to, because it's either college preparatory or different things. So ended up taking the tests. Yeah. Took the test, passed the test, and ended up going to the exact same high school my actual older brother went to. So we actually are, alumni of the same high school.
Oh, cool.
In Chicago. Yeah. Actually one of the biggest ones too in the city, but got in and went there and started there and entered into the college preparatory program, and just went through my high school years there. Was a athlete, of course, student athlete, played football, ran track. Also was on a debate team, which is also very funny for most people when they find that out about me.
No, but from my memories when we were working together, I can believe that.
It all makes sense.
Everything makes sense now.
Yeah. So yeah, I was on the debate team, and then throughout most of that time, it was split between, the academic part and the sport part. Did fairly well in school. But then end up going to college.
Okay, but real quick. So during all that time growing up and you were in Chicago, were y'all going to church? Did you have any faith influence back then?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
My mother growing up was heavily faith-based, and you know how they always say constantly in church every single day or every single time around the family. She was. And as we grew older, I guess because of her disdain for it, she didn't want to force that upon us, because, like I said, she didn't like it as much. So it was never a big thing in the house. We didn't attend churches or anything of the matter. We tried to do it once. There's actually a pretty interesting story where the church was walking distance from our house. It was actually a Catholic church. We're not Catholic. And we walked into the church and they kind of looked at us like we were crazy.
Really?
Yeah, they did. And, they came to us and asked us questions. It was like, well, what faith do you follow? We were like, well, we're Christians. We are Baptists by nature. My mother she grew up Southern Baptist. So they was like, well, you realize this is a Catholic church. So, you could still come to the service, just ensure that you kind of sit towards the back and let everybody else kind of sit forward.
Wait, they really said that?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
They did. Yeah. So of course that completely rubbed my mom the entire wrong way.
Yeah, understandable.
Yeah. So after that, it was wasn't really an attempt to go any churches. So, between birth and to college life or even prior military life, there was no church whatsoever.
Right.
So, and ended up going to college now that I left, try to get as far away from home as possible. So I
As a
ended
lot
up
of us
going to
do.
exactly. I ended up going to college in Florida. I went to Florida A&M, which is an historically black college down there,
Hmm.
and I stayed there for 3 semesters. At the time, even though I wasn't on scholarship at the time, interestingly enough, my father, who I wasn't raised by, wasn't in the picture. He left and walked out when I was 5, and he came back into my life when I was 18.
Hmm.
I only reconnected with him through my sister, who we found each other while we were both in Florida because she lived in the northern part of Florida and Tallahassee still in the northern part of Florida. So we ended up connecting, and because
Hmm.
of that connection, ended up going back with my father. Um, my father had been fortunate and blessed enough to win the Illinois lottery twice.
Oh, wow.
Not once, but twice. Yeah. So at the time, he had a lot of money. And that was basically how I was able to pay and afford to go to college.
Hmm.
Um, and my third semester, whatever rhyme or reason, he just decided that he didn't want to pay anymore. Um, so I had a choice to make. I said, well, either I had to go back home, which I did anyway, and work, but I didn't want to live with my mother again, or figure something out because I didn't want to take out loans to have mountains of debt after the fact.
Hmm.
So I
And
feel
he
like,
didn't explain any of his reasoning why of that to you.
no,
Okay.
no, he just didn't. Yeah, he just did not want to anymore. Never
Wow.
got a rhyme nor reason. So I was just, it wasn't a surprise, right? You weren't there for 16 years, no, not even 16, 13 years, right? So the opportunity, if you could help, you decided not to. That was just his personality, and it is what it is. I never, to this day, I never actually asked why,
Hmm.
to be honest with you. But I had to make a decision about what I was going to do.
Right.
Now, kind of backing up slightly just a little bit as far as who was around, as far as that father figure, I had my older brother who um, also was here, located in Texas as well, with me in North Texas.
And
But
what's the age
then
difference
also
there between you and your brother?
5 years,
Okay.
5 years. Yeah, so 5 years. And I also had my grandfather, who I essentially grew up with, and he was extremely militant because he was a Korean War vet. He
Mm.
was a cook during the Korean War, and then his brother served in World War II. So, and his, it continues to go down the line where in some major battle, ever since Civil War, a male figure in the family has been a part of that war, from Desert Shield to Storm to Bosnia to, going all the way back.
Oh, wow. So
So,
there's a
yeah.
legacy in your family.
Right, right. Mostly Army, but mostly the military legacy. So I grew up around him. And at that point in time, he was starting to get really, really low sick. But I said to myself, I have, 2 options. Either I can work, and I knew that I wouldn't, I would hit a ceiling because you can't even do so much when you don't work, right? When you work,
Hmm.
but you don't have a degree behind it.
Right.
Or I can go into the military and do my service and, get things that I need to get from that and move forward. So that's what I chose. So went to down to the recruiters, which is across the street. I already knew some of them because they always used to come to my school. So they used to kind of like cherry pick from my school, being that the recruiting station is right across the street. Go
Makes it
figure.
easy for him.
Right. So I went to the Marines and took my ASVAB and got my selections for what I wanted. I guess because I didn't want to wait long, I end up choosing aviation administrative versus I wanted Intel. That's what I really wanted. And I actually tested into Intel, but it was just a longer wait for it. They
Mhm.
call it the DEP program. I'm not familiar with that or heard that, delayed
Yep.
entry.
Delayed entry
Yeah.
program. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I was depped in. So I was still waiting, but they was like, I can get you out, faster now to do this versus waiting. I don't know how many months it was to do Intel. So I was like, whatever, I'm just gonna leave because I didn't want to be at home anymore anyway.
And you said you went for aviation maintenance administration.
Yes,
So you
yes,
were an
yes, yes.
AZ.
AZ, Meridian, Mississippi.
Meridian,
AZ.
Mississippi. Yep.
Yep. Uh,
Memories.
yes. So yeah, I was AZ, and then went in and did boot camp. Got out, did my A school in Meridian, and was assigned to Hawaii. Was my first duty station, my first and only duty station. I did 4.5 years in Hawaii.
Mhm.
Um, got to Hawaii, and I thought this is going to be either the greatest thing in the world or the worst thing in the world. Got there, absolutely beautiful. The weather was great. This is 2009 into 10, by the way.
Mhm.
Weather was great. Lovely atmosphere. Everything was great. I get there the day of the Marine Corps Ball in November. Um, and they tell me, hey, we weren't expecting you. How? I have no idea. But we'll get you to supply tomorrow to get you everything that you need while you're here and get you assigned to your barracks. Cool. Stayed in a hotel that night, had a good time. Next day comes up. They're like, well, here's your gear list and here's your other gear list. I said, what do you mean my other gear list? And he was like, the staff sergeant at the time was like, well, they didn't tell you? Tell me what? It was like, you're getting special assignment. You're going to Iraq to close out the program.
Oh yeah,
I was
welcome to
like,
Hawaii.
right.
Here's your
I was
ticket to Iraq.
right. I was like, I've been here 24 hours and you sending me to Iraq. I was like, all right. So my thinking is they obviously can't send you right away, right? You got to need some build up, some training, something.
Oh, but they can.
So I was like, how soon do I leave? Oh, in 2 weeks. I was like, wow. So I had to gather my things together and end up going to Iraq. But even going over there was actually pretty fun. I'm not gonna lie, because I don't know if you've ever been to Diego Garcia, but it's actually really nice out there, and you
Sailed
fly
past
this
it.
really. Okay, yeah. So went to Diego Garcia. Had a really really good time. Stayed there overnight, and was able to travel there as a civilian. Got there. It wasn't nothing hard. It was just kind of winding down at that time in those years, and Afghanistan was more so kicking up versus Iraq. So
Hmm.
we were just breaking down the planes. We had CH-53 Deltas at the time, and they're either being retired or sold off to different countries. So we're just doing all that basic work and transferring and database work. So I went out there and did that, learned about the different atmosphere, what is it like to be CONUS versus OCONUS? How does it feel to be, forward deploy? What exactly does that mean? Because you hear people talk about it in boot camp, even though throughout the duration of boot camp, going through the hard, extensive training, like, at some point, the guy to your left or right is going to be deployed between the Middle East at some point, right?
Hmm.
That's just how it worked at that time.
Yeah.
But you really don't believe that. You're like, we'll see. We don't know exactly what's going on. But then, of course, at that time here, United States was going through its issues because of the housing crisis. So I was like,
Yep.
we for sure is not about to go through no war. We ain't got no money. Everybody's pretty much, either got really rich off the failing of the housing or got really, really poor off the one of the two, right?
Yeah, one way or the other. There
So,
was no in between
right.
back then.
right. Right. So I was like, it's not going to be that bad. So got sent out to Iraq and, did my duty out there. Was out there for 4 months or 5 months, really, but 4 months. Came back
So
with Adva
yeah, where were you in Iraq?
Ramadi.
Ramadi. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Airfield in Ramadi. So, but it wasn't bad out there. Like, was day crew, was able to, kind of get hulked up, as people say out there, taking the Jack 3D and all the different things and working out and I actually enjoyed the chow hall food.
Hmm.
Go figure, right? Wasn't bad.
Not many people do.
Um, not many people do. No, I wasn't, in the field and had MREs every single day. Like, no, we had showers. Um, the LWR had like different games and just different things. I was able to call home a lot. I mean, it wasn't bad.
Hmm.
Kind of like a vacation almost. It's kind of weird to say being in Iraq. It wasn't non-combat, deployment for me. So did that, did my due diligence, came back to Hawaii, and at that time, I ended up meeting my wife, or ex-wife, I should say.
Hmm.
But at the time, we ended up, meeting. She was a nurse going to nursing school out there because Hawaii Pacific University was one of the top universities at the time in nursing on the West Coast.
Okay.
um, and ended up meeting her. She was a native Californian, only a year older than me at the time, but met her, courted her and dated for a while, and ended up proposing and getting married. But throughout that time, going through buildups, because you guessed it, coming back from Iraq, what do you think the next place we went was? I already mentioned it earlier where he said everybody was going to go.
Everybody goes back to Iraq.
Afghanistan, actually, but yeah, close enough.
Yeah,
Close enough,
it's just
right?
across the Gulf.
Yeah, just across the Gulf, yeah. So we're in buildups for that. Um, and end up going through and doing the buildup. So, of course, got to go to what is it called? Everybody goes to it in Arizona too.
Yuma or
Yuma, yeah, Yuma, yeah, yeah, is weapons tactics safety. What's the extra acronym? You remember? You know what I'm talking about?
I just know the air base.
Yeah, but that's where we were. But it's a training for there. I think most people know. I just can't think of the acronym, and I know most of our live is acronyms at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But and I'm going out there. Had a good time out there, and just have to do the cold, have to do the heat. It being kind of desert like, so get our bodies used to it. Um, and we're just out there doing that for a few months. Um, and then just transition, came back, ended up getting married. It was extremely happy, blissful time for me. I was like, I'm finally married. I found the person that I wanted to be with and loved. But I was also terrified too.
Yeah, understandable, especially when you're about to
I,
deploy.
right. I don't know. You get those distinct instincts and you just feel sometimes like we know what things are going to be not the greatest or something might be up or something, situation.
Mm-hmm.
And something telling me that Afghanistan wasn't going to be the best deployment. But end up getting married. We end up leaving in August, late August to leave. Um, and got on that plane. And of course, they do the usual in through Manas and stayed in Manas for a little bit in Kazakhstan and then end up going into Afghanistan. Um, End up being in Afghanistan was different, a different feel than Iraq altogether. Iraq was more, how would you describe it? Like more of a townish type of feel versus just desert with desert towns and everything spread apart.
Mm-hmm.
Iraq was more urban, put it that way. I don't know if you've ever been to
Yeah,
Iraq, but it was more
a lot
urban.
more infrastructure and
Right, 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 right. Way more infrastructure, even in the different towns that you fly over and you see. Just doing daily missions, being an extra support gunner or moving materials from this place to that place. It wasn't bad. Um, but going into Afghanistan, that was just a whole different, beast. Everybody goes to Camp Leatherneck, essentially, where all the Marines are based at.
mm-hmm.
And this is going into 2011 at this point. Iraq was 2010. This is 2011, just between the buildups and the workup to get there.
Right.
Get to Afghanistan, and I actually got hooked up there too, just like I did getting on base in Hawaii. It was about maybe a month in, distinguishing what crews you're going to be on. I was the lowest, and from a rank perspective, only being a lance corporal, which is an E3. So it was like, guys, big heavy set guys come in. It was like, hey, Gunny, at the time it was Gunny Trower. It was like, or Gunny Pelez, I'm sorry, Gunny Pelez. It was like, so we need your youngest male and we need your youngest female Marines. So that was me and Lance Corporal Pazmino. I'll never forget that. And we looked at each other like, crap. So our assumption, based upon what we had heard when we got there, when you get there, they tell you the whole thing. Stay away from, you'll see those sand spires about the size of your hand. It chases your shadow. Don't shoot it. Don't kill it. Make sure you drink water so you don't, urinate butter. I actually didn't know what that meant until I literally drink water because you will, sweat that much because it's so hot in
Yeah.
Afghanistan. So hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. And then, just a different, animals. They had us taking those pills for, we took a smallpox vaccine, but malaria pills. So everybody's
Mm-hmm.
wigging out from that. um,
And you can't be out in the sun
and
for too long, which is
no,
hard because you're in Afghanistan. There's
right?
Nothing
Nothing
but
but
sun.
sun and sand, right?
Right, right.
So, but I ended up being night crew, so that was a blessing and a curse, right? It wasn't in the sun, but it being a desert, the disparity between the temperature is ridiculous. It's
Mm-hmm.
100 plus in the daytime. Even at that point in time, it's still August, September, but then it drops to negatives at night, and you're freezing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just makes no sense, right?
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that the sand does not retain heat and it has no thermal properties whatsoever. So it
Right.
gets like ridiculously cold.
Yeah. So being on night crew, I was there for a month, and guy comes in. We the two youngest Marines. Me and Pasmino go. So they take us into a different room. They like, so Pasmino, you're gonna go to gate guard. That's what we all hear about, right? Everybody goes to gate guard. You send a big 50 count mount towards a certain location. You watch the gate because you have friendly gate, main gate outside the base, where the towns that are outside of it are right there, where you can actually see the locals and how they live and things of that nature. You just have a gate, safety precaution measures.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking we're both about to do this. So they was like, well, you're going to be gate guard daytime, Pasmino. So report to MP, this, that, and the third. So I'm like, what gate guard am I going to? And he looked at me and waited till she left. He goes, well, you're not going to go to gate guard. I'm like, I'm sorry. What is it that you want me to do? So the guy looks at me. He goes, come with me. And I was like, okay. So
Sounds like
you
you're about
walk
to get
out.
hooked up.
Right.
Not in a good
So
way.
not in a good way whatsoever. We walk out, we go to the armorer. Of course, most basic Marines don't carry extra stuff. We
Mm-hmm.
don't have our M16. So he goes, you need to relinquish your M16 and all your ammo to the armorer and receive your new gears list. I said, new gears list? I don't know what that means, but okay. So give him my M16. So he gives me a sidearm. He gives me a 45 and 10 grenades and about 600 rounds, M4 carbine, and with the M203 rocket, grenade launcher on top of it. And they
The
tell me to
fun
strip
stuff.
down to the fun stuff. And they tell me to strip down to my skivvies. I'm like, okay. This is a room just with three guys in it, by the way. And they sit there looking at me. They're not in uniform whatsoever. Look at me like I am crazy. So of course, I'm nervous. I'm just like, I don't know exactly what the heck's about to happen. What's going on? And he was like, have you talked to your family, within the last 24 hours? I was like, no. They go, well, that's highly unfortunate. Didn't know what that meant either. I was like, I don't know exactly what's
Yeah,
going on here.
not ominous at all.
Right. So as I'm stripping down, they give me regular clothes to put on. I'm like, this is not the Marine Corps issue uniform. They put the uniform on. Okay. You look like you could probably put me to sleep quickly. I'm just going to follow what you say. Um, and then my gunnery sergeant comes in. He goes, all right, here's his orders. I said, my orders, typically you get TDY to something. And my gunny looked at me and he was like, good luck and, God bless you. I was like, I don't know what this means at this point. Why do I have orders? Why am I TDY'd? Why am I
And
in
why do I not
regular?
have a warm, fuzzy feeling?
Exactly. So the guy pulls me aside, my gunny leaves, the armor leaves. He goes, from here on out, this is your new name. This is your new identity. Your name is this. And I was like, okay, from this point on, you're to stop shaving. You're to let your hair grow naturally, however the patterns may be. And this is a machine that you're going to use. He gave me a biometrics machine.
Mm-hmm.
This is a retina scan, and this is a facial recognition, and this is an imprint thing. Your job is to be able to get this from somebody within 60 seconds, all three, and make a positive ID.
Oh, wow.
And he'll let you, like you can sit here and practice for a little bit. This is what you, do. So he goes, okay, I do my practice, do it on myself, do it on another guy that was standing there, get our IDs, everything pops up in the system, right? Because if you're military, of course you're in the system. So I'm like, okay. He goes, now you are a part of Special Forces MARSOC 1. My name is, blah, blah, blah. And this is your job from here on out. You're reporting to the prison on Camp Bastion. You will be working prison detail for the remainder of your deployment.
So you still aren't even allowed to talk about what your name was that they gave you?
No.
Oh, wow.
No. So it was multiple names.
Right.
You only do certain things in certain places, and you can't go to certain places with certain stamps. Otherwise, it gets really, really messy. really quickly.
Right.
For that reason, because we were moving prisoners around that region, right?
Hmm.
So he was like, "Yeah, this is your name. You report to this person, and that's your job." I'm just like, okay. So we got in the big, MRAP, drove me off of base, going through a town, and reported to a prison. Popped up. There was a few other people that was there that was just like me that wasn't a part of the group, and it was a lot more of them. And it was like, your job is to basically get positive identification of whoever we tell you to get it from, make sure it's that correct person, and report it to the correct authorities. Once we have positive ID, we'll bag and tag, we're out of here. This has to be done relatively quickly because we love our lives. We don't want to get killed. So I'm like,
Understandable.
I was like, you don't got nobody else that can do this? You want somebody who hasn't been trained and hasn't been with y'all for X amount, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't train this way. You after boot
Like,
camp, you go to
I've only been here
MCT.
5 minutes.
Right. I've only been here, less than a month. You go to MCT. The most we did was, we got tear gas when we were going through our final test.
Hmm.
That was it. I have no idea, anything about this. He was just like, yeah, you just have to do this, do it right, do it accurately, and, we all come home. I'm like, okay, well, I guess this is going to be my new job. So we did prison detail and we moved prisoners throughout the region. And in November of that same year was the first time during a convoy, because we couldn't get you moving through the air because we couldn't get a plane in that position, even an MH60 or nothing. With the CVs, they ended up moving us through the ground. We took an IED attack and got hit and messed up my spine. Nobody
Mm.
died in the actual accident, that crash or
Oh,
that
that's good.
explosion. Yeah, nobody died. But we were ambushed, and a lot of things ended up happening that night that weren't that great. But I
Can you
guess
tell
the
us about
adrenaline
that?
was basically, it was a high priority target, and essentially they're trying to silence him, not necessarily trying to get us. I guess getting us is kind of the bonus, but trying
Hmm.
to silence him for getting us any information because typically how it worked, depending upon who the person was. If it was a big known drug lord, they did special missions to burn the people's plate, like the land of the places, and then they would end up supplementing them with food and water and money. If they take away all their crops, the main crop that's in Afghanistan is opium. So you burning
Right.
most of their opium fields. Of course, opium's processed into drugs and
Hmm.
sold, and different things. Um, or if there was known terrorists that we were actually trying to get. So this particular person was a known terrorist threat to not only us, different regions, but also to their own people. So they're basically trying to silence him and get him not to talk. Because you always have an interpreter with you. That's Afghan too, and then maybe a part of the ANA, which is the Afghan National Army, or maybe not.
Hmm.
And of course, not saying that they can't be trusted, but you never know exactly what's going on. I don't speak Farsi, I don't speak Pashto, I don't speak, Arabic. You
Hmm.
don't really understand. Some words, basic commands, so you can, get them to do what you need them to do, but you don't understand other language. They're having full conversations. So
Right.
we ended up getting ambushed and they blew up the MRAP. Now, luckily, I don't know if you've seen an MRAP, it's huge,
Hmm.
it didn't take much damage to it, but the plate that we were sitting on came up and really messed up my spine. And then we had to get evac and call the QRF to come assist because we were pinned down, and then ended up getting out by M22 and B-22 that came in, was able to get in at the time, flying over doing another mission, was able to come scoop us up,
Hmm.
able to get back to base. And getting back, I immediately passed out. I had no idea what was going on. The base that we were actually on was Camp Bastion, which was a part of Leatherneck, but it's a little bit off because different nations have their own separate bases that was not Leatherneck. So you had the British base, you had the Finnish base, you had the British was Bastion. They're all from Britain. And then you had the different LSAs where contractors were. So you had DynCorp, you had KBR, you had other big names that were out there at the same time.
So they're like little
Halliburton.
satellite branches off of the same
Yes.
main base.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes, yes. So, and I woke up inside the hospital, and I remember I was covered from my waist down. And hindsight thinking about it, it's not funny, but it was kind of funny because at the time I thought I lost my legs. because
Oh
everything was
no.
happening so fast. Because like when you first hear the shouting and the explosion, and your ears are ringing, you're just in that true fog of war. You really
Hmm.
don't know what's going on, and that's probably why I can't take AK fire now. Is that little cack 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 cack, and it's extremely loud. Like AKs are very loud
And very
with no
distinctive.
earplug. Right, exactly. With no earplugs, no ear pro, no nothing. You just hear it, and just all that stuff is piercing. So literally, we're in a firefight, just shooting, 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 back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until you hear kind of the boom, and, the shooting stops.
Hmm.
And then you get lifted on the plane, and you get lifted out. And that sound being, of course, the 50 cal on the planes that they have, or
Hmm.
if you needed the good old AWACS that was providing support from above, gunships, whatever the case may be, to help us out. And I remember waking up that day, and I'm just like looking down, and I was blood covered. So I was like, I have no legs. I lost my legs. I lost my mind. Lost my mind in the hospital. I'm like, oh my God, I am legless. Take me down. Like I'm losing it, to the point where the nurses are like having their hand over my mouth. They're like, shut up. You're scaring everybody else. I'm like, scared everybody else. I ain't got no legs no more. They like, you have legs. You took shrapnel. That's just blood from the shrapnel. They uncovered me. I have all my legs. I'm like, whew. I thought literally I had no legs. I thought I lost in an explosion. Like I didn't really recollect what happened, because you just running and drilling.
Yeah, but even
So
that, in a moment like that, like when you think you're not a whole person anymore, right?
right,
Just that in its own, like you're trying to process so many things at one time, right? Like
right,
you're thinking about, how am I going to go the rest of my life without no legs? How am I going to do this right now? How am I going to do this in 10 years? What just happened in like 10 minutes ago?
right,
So many different thoughts you're trying to process simultaneously. And that
right,
takes you to
right.
weird places.
It does. It does. Because, like I said, I couldn't recollect anything that was going on. Woke up, I'm scared for my life. Luckily, like I said, I was blessed to have my legs. Everybody who was with us was blessed. They were all there at the same time. Was nobody lost a limb. Some people took more damage than others, but nobody lost a limb. The prisoner, he was all right. Um,
Done.
but the funny part is just the rigidness of that particular group, special forces group. The guy comes in. He's like, is he alive? Well, obviously I am. Looking at me, he goes, well, can he walk? Can he function? Can he shoot? Nurse looked at him and said, yes, yes, and yes. They said, well, give him some pain medication. Looked at me and said, get your stuff together, in a more meaner way, in more illicit language or solicit languages. And it was
Hmm.
like, we'll wills up in 3 hours, and walked
Hydrate
out.
and change your socks. Let's go.
Exactly. And the nurse looked at me, like, kind of shrugged her shoulders, was like, all right, I mean,
You better get
here's some
on.
pain meds. Here's some pain meds. If you need them, take them. That's all we can give you. And yeah, good luck. And I was up and out, and I was on mission again that next day. I don't even know if it had been a full day. It was daytime, and then going into the night, and we were wheels up again, going to different cities. I mean, we visited some minor, major satellite cities. The Musakalas, the Lashkar and Kabul's. We went to Kandahar a couple of times, but and these are just places all well known of the region, so you did not like OPSEC or anything else like that. But
Hmm.
different, satellite locations, and I was just like, in the back of my head, I didn't have the time to be scared. I didn't have the time to reflect on what just happened,
Right.
right? Because I had a job to do, and I had to do it. So this is going on for, like I said, the duration of most of my deployment. And I end up taking another IED attack again. This one wasn't as bad, just because we got blown up again, moving another high priority target, and different city, different location, different province in Afghanistan. Because most of the work was in South Helmand province, but this was a different location. And just it wasn't as bad. Was able to actually get out, drag the person out, and just fire back, and follow our ROE and do things we were supposed to do. And then we had air cover at that time, so it wasn't as bad. We were able to get out quickly. We had the skid kids, the Yankees and the Zulus helping us out. So um, they came and was able to airlift us out quickly. But then I didn't end up in the hospital that time. Um, it was just the fact that it happened again. So I guess I was kind of better prepared for it.
Hmm.
Um,
Which is weird to
and
say.
right.
for
And
given the
it's like,
circumstances.
right. So I was like, all right, I've been through this before. I know exactly what's going to happen. This is exactly what I got to do. Boom, boom, boom. Let's go. Let's get out of here. Let's get out of Dodge. Um, and then on January 19th, 2012, during a mission, we had received information and they were trying to use us as QRF, even though it was only four of us, that a plane had gotten shot down and they were hard down and they needed, search and rescue and QRF to be assist immediately. Didn't know exactly what was going on. So ended up returning back to base after we finished mission, and walked in to do the paperwork that I normally would do because I do paperwork every single day, following all the paperwork of people we caught and what we did, and basically just having the tracking.
The
And the
after action
commander,
reports.
right, the commander at the time looked at me. He was like, "You need to return to your squadron." I was like, "Return to my squadron?" I'm not understanding. He goes, "Take my car and go back to your squadron right now." So I remember I was like, okay, which is weird because it's after mission, it's morning time. I need to get sleep because we're going right back out at nighttime.
Mm-hmm.
And drove his car, turned the lights on, flew back to Leatherneck. And I remember arriving back at my work area. And it was with my boss, my army sergeant, sitting there. And he was just sitting in a chair by himself, which is weird. There was nobody at the base. Like some people walking around, but not like the usual activity that we usually would be doing. Usually, you have spinning aircraft in case something happens. Because most of the things that happen in Afghanistan happen at nighttime for
Mm-hmm.
cover. You really, you might get mortared during the daytime, but it's not as bad. And I remember he was just sitting there, and he was just like, and I remember walking around looking at him. And I remember tears were just rolling down his face. I was like, "Why is he crying for? What's going on?" And he looked at me, and he was like, "Iron Tail 2-4 went down hard, and they're gone. All six of them are gone with six of my guys from our unit."
Oh man.
So I was like, "What do you mean that they're gone?" He goes, "The plane went down and total loss, Class A mishap. So total loss, nobody survived. The planes didn't survive. They're looking for the box. It may have been shot up. The main gearbox ejected, which is, bad news. So trying to look for that as well because it's a $13 million part, and they lost. They're gone. Part of the guys that were gone were all like essentially my boss's boss and that had grown close to,
Mm-hmm.
and they were shot down. Me and Pasmina both returned back to base. We both pulled up around the same time. So she broke down crying. I guess I was still confused and kind of in the haze of kind of everything's going on because there was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I returned back and they was like, well, based upon the request from your command, you were relieved of your duty from us. And I returned back to my command because we're under investigation because it was you guys from the Navy that came out. They do an actual income as a Class A mishap, regardless where you are.
Mm-hmm.
They lock up all the logbooks, put them together, and they send everything back to DC almost immediately.
Right.
So guys came in white uniform in Afghanistan, which is kind of weird. Handcuffs on his hand, handcuffed the actual logbook record holder thing, and then told everybody to stand up and leave the area and came, got their stuff, and left back out and sent everything back to DC. And it was just crazy what happened. Like we were on very limited missions from then on out. Returned back in April. Um, and we didn't do much because we knew that, Class A mishap was pretty bad. So, and we were actually doing transition because the next unit that was going to replace us was already in. So it was up to that commander to take over and do all air missions. So we kind of got, if you want to look at it, suspended, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we weren't doing anything. And I remember returning home and this having to deal with a lot of things that were happening at the time, right? Moving prisoners, seeing the amount of death that's involved in Afghanistan, and just seeing Afghanistan in itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Typically, when you go to these places, you don't get to look outside, right? You're just in your particular area. You do what you have to do, and that's your deployment. You don't leave. You get used to that little area around
Right.
you, but it's different when you're outside the wire.
Yeah, exactly. So
So,
when you are outside the wire, what little Afghanistan you do see, it's not in a hey, let's go see the sights type of thing. It's you're there for a reason, and that reason
right,
is not good. Right.
right,
We're at
right,
war.
right. Um, but I can honestly say the most, and I've been to many different countries in this world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Seen many different things: Asia, Antarctica, Alaska. Um, just Europe, different places. That is the place with the most beautiful sunrises I've ever seen before in my life.
Oh yeah.
Like it's truly majestic. If you're in a plane flying back to your base and you're looking out into the abyss and it's just nothing but black sand and the sun's cresting up and you crest on the mountains and you see nothing but purple opium fields.
Oh
And
wow.
I mean the sun out there when it's huge, like almost scary hues, like it's something about to happen, almost like some type of eclipse or something. And it is like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen before.
Hmm.
And that's pretty much the only thing of beauty that I found while I was there because everything else is just desolate, right?
Right.
But looking at that, I was like, this is just the most amazing looking thing. But then you think about how they live, right? The basic necessities, and you're trying to monitor the prisoners and you're on mission. And the little things that we take for granted, the little things that we just don't realize as Americans, to us, what might be something natural is not the same to them, right?
Right.
Where, for us, you have the luxury of going to a bathroom, having a toilet to begin with, right? Not a
Right.
hole,
Indoor
not digging
plumbing.
a ditch, indoor plumbing, and being able to use the bathroom, have tissue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tissue, basic septic. They had no idea what it was foreign to them. You give it to them, they look at it, and they give it back to you like, we don't know what this is. What am I supposed to do with this? To like physically show them what to do because you want them to be as sanitary as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Typically for them, they use their fingers. That's how they're taught. That's how they clean themselves. Um, and they don't have bottled water, clean bottled water like we do. Giving it to them and it's just amazing looking at it. Like I remember, part of the Geneva Convention, part of the things we had to do was make sure they were fed their food. They couldn't eat our food because that's not what their diets are.
Mm-hmm.
So wherever it's specific to the Muslim faith, it had to be heated up. You had to get them somewhere to lay their head, an actual bed, an actual pillow, and they showered every 2 days,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even taking them to the shower, they thought that either we were about to gas them or something, right? Because these are grown men crying like they're about to die, and it's not the case. It's like we're just trying to wash you so you don't smell.
So
And
so that's interesting. It points out something that was very weird that was going on at that time that a lot of people don't understand is that the propaganda that was put out is very similar to back in World War II. The stories that we hear about that, where the Japanese were telling the citizenry of, hey, when the Americans come in, they're going to do all these horrible things, right? And so there was a lot
right,
of that going on in that, and even in Iraq, but Iraq and Afghanistan at that time, that hey, if the Americans come in, if the Americans catch you, they're going to do horrible things to you. And so when you're doing something like what you were doing innocently, hey, we're just taking you over to get a shower, man. They think you're going to do something wrong.
right. They look at you as if like you're gonna like kill them or something.
Mm-hmm. And it's not that at all. But yeah.
So yeah, just looking at that and coming back to the squadron, and then just dealing with all that. We abided our time, and then we returned home. Um, and I remember just being extremely happy to leave that place. Like to this day,
Understandable.
I don't like sand that much to be honest with you. It's like, let's go to the beach. Let's not.
Yeah.
Um,
Seen enough sand.
exactly. The last in a lifetime. Um, Ended up returning home, so happy to see my wife, stepping off that plane. Because I was actually, the funny part about the plane ride home, when you leave Afghanistan, you have to go back to Manas, right? To check back out, to clear everything out, to go through customs, see
Mm-hmm.
that you're not taking things home. A lot of people try to sneak hashish or somebody, people try to do dumb things to try to get money, right?
Yes, they
Back
do.
home. Um, Never Marines, never the Navy either. It's
Oh,
always like
never.
the Army or
Never.
the Air Force. Um, Trying to do things of that nature because people actually did get in trouble while we're out there for exactly that, trying to smuggle back drugs back to the United States. But you go through Manas, but at the time in April, they were still in their winter time. And I remember the people coming to us that ran the airport was like, you have two choices. Either you go through customs, you sit here for 18 hours straight. Let's do what you have to do. Because typically you get 4 days in Manaus before you return home. Excuse me. Excuse me. Either you get 4 days in Manaus before you return home,
Hmm.
or there's no or. You get 4 days in Manaus. There's no or usually with that. There you go. You stay here and we clear you guys out and you guys can get out of here, right? Or you have to wait after the snowstorm. You might be here a week. Of course, we all was like, no, we want to go home now. So let's just get this party started.
Yeah,
We want
don't
to get
give
out of
me that
here.
option.
Right, please don't. So I remember sitting. I mean, this is physically sitting there. There's no downtime. Like, typically, you get German. It's a German place. I forgot exactly what it's called, and they have a Burger King and a Pizza Hut. Usually, those are connected, or A&W. I don't really know that really what that is. I just know the root beer, but it's like A&W restaurant. Those are
Yeah,
connected when you're
it's
out
not
the
that good.
country. Okay, gotcha. Those
you
are
you
connected
didn't
when you're
miss much.
right. Those are connected when you're outside the country. Because I remember when we got there, taking the bus in, I went to the Burger King to get a Whopper, and I remember the guys behind me was like, "So you just got a Whopper, huh?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." He goes, "Oh, okay. That's gonna be real good for you, real good." He goes, "This quick question: When you were coming in, did you see any cows?"
Oh
I
no.
was like,
Oh no.
no. I was
Don't do
like,
this to
the
me.
same thing with, right. I was like, don't deny me this. Or pizza, right? I'm like, where you getting cheese from that there's no cows, right? It has to be some type of dairy, right? Or some type of milk from something. It
Hmm.
ain't a cow, not made something. But that's just the little funny side story that they always have when you go to Manaus. But no, we're sitting in Manaus waiting to leave, not able to do much. Couldn't drink, couldn't do anything. And I remember they was like, yeah, you guys can go. So they prepared us to go. We were able to get out before the snowstorm hit. Even though geographically it may not make much sense to go to Hawaii from Germany to Maine to Hawaii, you're going west,
Hmm.
it seems shorter. It is shorter, but it went east. So we went from the Middle East to Japan.
Hmm.
That flight in itself was 12 hours on a plane.
I believe
On a
it.
military flight. Yeah, C5. So we're not in the commercial at all.
Mm-mm.
So we land in Kadena and we
Down
have
in
to refuel.
Okinawa.
Refuel it, yeah, in Okinawa. And the 3 hours to refuel because we had weapons because of the imperial grounds of Japan and their rules. We couldn't get off the plane.
Hmm.
We had a 14-hour flight, had an additional another 10-hour flight, and we had a 3 hour stay on the plane. So basically a whole day on the plane.
Hmm.
So people are passed out. Our doc came, gave people like sleeping Ambien because he didn't care at that point. People's legs were cramping. It was just so we didn't have to stay the extra possible week for the snowstorm to pass.
Hmm.
And then we actually were able to fly back into our own base in Kaneohe Bay, so that was actually pretty nice. Scared the daylight of you flying through the mountain. Literally, had to like bang through a mountain to land in a bigger plane, but we still did it. Came home, and I never been so glad to step off into Hawaii. I just remember racking my gun and getting dismissed out of formation and saying, we're good for a week, and was able to go on leave and able to enjoy being away from home and away from work and go home. And it was
Hmm.
just a lovely, 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 lovely feeling.
Yeah.
But, it was at that point where things started to change.
Interesting. And that is a good point to snip this off and wrap up episode one for your story. So when we come back next week, we're going to hear the remainder of Marine Corps veteran Marcus Davis's story and everything that you just heard, how all the troubles and the trials and the trauma he went through in Afghanistan with all the craziness that happened there, and probably even some more craziness after he got home. We're going to hear how God is able to turn all that around and make a beautiful story out of it. So make sure you guys come back next week to hear that. And for those of you that are also veterans and you want to be able to tell your story, please reach out to us. We have the Facebook page. Find the email on there. Send me an email. Send me a message. We'd love to give you a platform to tell your story. Don't forget to find us on here on Spotify, on iHeart, Audible, Google Podcasts, and a few others. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week.